Hey everybody, welcome to another lesson of learning Japanese. Today we are going to cover another grammar pattern, and we're going to cover a grammar pattern that is possibly one of the most requested grammar patterns, and that is going to be the usage of the word kagiri. And this is going to be a word with a lot of definitions, so I'm not sure if it's any use to state them all right now, but in this case we're gonna be kind of introduced to this word. And so the grammar pattern, the simple basic one that we're gonna have first, is using kagiri to mean as long as. So basically our grammatical construction here is going to be x kagiri y, and that's going to mean as long as x then y. And the kind of more specific definition, I guess, would be as long as x holds true, then y will hold true as well. And so you might be wondering, well, what kind of things can we use for x with kagiri? And we can actually use kagiri with verbs, we can use it with nouns, and we can also use it with adjectives, but the usage of adjectives is actually rather limited. And so the last thing to note here would be that kagiri, like many other grammar patterns, it demands that we use the plain form of words for x, the thing that is directly preceding it. So this is going to be particularly important for nouns and not adjectives as usual as well. We've seen this pattern in many other grammar patterns. If we're using nouns and not adjectives, we're going to have to add this little phrasing after them and right before kagiri, which is going to be the phrasing dearu, or the particle na, or if we're using negative form, it's going to be denai. So yeah, hopefully that was thorough enough of an exposition. Let's jump into some example sentences. So for our first example sentence, we'll be using this with a verb, and this is going to be a regular verb in its dictionary form. Our first example sentence is この試験に受かるかぎり卒業出来る, and this is going to translate to as long as I pass this test, I will be able to graduate in time. So let's break down this sentence bit by bit. First up, we just have kono, and this is going to translate to this. It's going to be modifying the noun right after it to mean this noun, and that noun is going to be shiken, which means test. So this test. We have the particle ni because this is going to be the particle that we just use for test, and the verb that we're about to use, which is ukaru, which is going to translate to basically, in this case, to pass. When it's used with the word shiken, it's going to mean to pass the test. Shiken ni ukaru is going to mean to pass the test. And so ukaru is going to be a verb, and it's going to be in its plain form, and it's going to be that's the dictionary form. It doesn't necessarily have to be the dictionary form, but the dictionary form is a plain form, so we can use it with kagiri now. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to add kagiri right after ukaru, and this is going to mean as long as I pass, and adding on that part before ukaru, as long as I pass this test, basically. And so, like I said, the construction of this grammar pattern means if x is true, then y is true. So as long as I pass this test, if it's true that I pass this test, then the part of the sentence after kagiri is also going to turn out to be true, which is going to be the wording sotsugyou dekiru, and this is going to be the verbal noun sotsugyou suru, which means to graduate, and suru is just going to be conjugated into its potential form, which is dekiru, which means can do. So can graduate, and so yeah, I can graduate as long as I pass this test. この試験に受かるかぎり卒業できる. And this is going to, well, I already said what it means, so yeah, that's what it means. Hopefully you got it. Let's move on to our next example sentence, and we're going to be using kagiri with a non-adjective. And so our line is 元気であるかぎりテニスし続けたいと思う. Shisuzuketai. And so what this line will translate to is as long as I am healthy, I want to continue playing tennis. So first up, we have the word genki, which is a non-adjective. It's going to translate to kind of healthy, full of spirit, something along those lines. This is going to be a non-adjective, and this is the word that we want to use with kagiri. So to do that, we need to be in its plain form, as well as that little phrasing that we need after it and before kagiri, which is going to be dearu. So we're going to add dearu. So genki dearu kagiri is going to be as long as healthy, and the implied subject, of course, is me. So as long as I'm healthy. And now we move on to the second half of the sentence, which is the y in the construction. We have the word tenisu, and this is going to translate to tennis, basically. Then we have the verb suru plus the verb suzukeru, which means to continue. And this is a grammar pattern that we've covered before. The premas form of a verb plus the verb to continue, which is suzukeru, and this is going to mean to continue doing that verb. And so if our verb that we're going to use with this is going to be the verbal noun tenisu suru, which means to play tennis, basically, then we add suzukeru. That's going to mean to continue to play tennis. but we're going to conjugate suzukeru into its tai form to mean to want to continue. So suzuketai is going to be to want to continue playing tennis. And then we have another grammar pattern, which is the tai form of verb plus tomo to basically just also mean to want to do. So altogether, once again, genki de aru kagiri tennisu shisuzuketai tomo. And this will translate to as long as I am healthy, I want to continue playing tennis. Moving on to our third and second last example sentence, we're going to be using this grammar pattern kagiri with a verb in its negative form. So for our example sentence, we have the line とんでもない事件が起こらない限り授業に間に合う. And this is going to translate to as long as some unbelievable accident doesn't end up happening, I or we will make it to class in time. So let's break down the sentence bit by bit. First up, we have the adjective that is とんでもない, and this is going to translate to basically unbelievable, unheard of, unimaginable, something along those lines. It's going to be conjugating, no, not conjugating, what the heck? It's going to be modifying the word right after it, which is the word shiken, which means accident. So some kind of unbelievable accident or some wild accident beyond your imagination, something along those lines. That's going to be the subject of this first clause, so we have the particle ga to mark it as such. Then we have the verb okoru, which means to occur, to happen, and it's going to mean its negative form because we want to say doesn't happen. So okorenai, and then we're going to add our grammar pattern word, which is kagiri. So as long as some unbelievable accident doesn't happen, doesn't end up happening, then the y part of the sentence is also going to be true, which is going to be jugyo ni maniao. And jugyo is going to translate to class. We have the particle ni to mark it as not sure what to call it, but this is just what we use. Ni is just what we use with the verb that we're about to use, which is maniao, which means to make in time, basically. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any explaining that needs to be done there. Let's just repeat the sentence or something. とんでもない事件が起こらない限り授業に間に合う translates to we will make it in time for class as long as some crazy, stupid accident doesn't end up happening. Let us now move on to our last example sentence. And so we are going to use, we've used verbs in their negative form, we've used no adjectives, now we're going to use the noun. So for our example sentence, we have the line このチームの一部である限り練習に行かなくてはいけません. And so what this line will translate to is as long as you're a part of this team, you have to show up to practice. So let's break down this sentence. First up, we have この again. This is going to translate to this. It's going to be modifying the word right after it, which is チーム, which is going to translate to team. So this team. Right after that, we have the particle no, because we're going to be turning this into a noun of a noun modification here. And so この team is going to be the first noun in this noun modification. Then the second one is going to be ichibu, which is going to translate to basically part of. So この team no ichibu is going to be part of this team. Then right after that, we have the phrasing de aru, which means basically to be. So as long as you are being a part of this team, basically. Actually, this is a pretty special case that's kind of worth pointing out, because when we use de aru, this actually also kind of translates to is. But in this grammar guideline here, we say that we can add the phrasing de aru right after nouns or after not adjectives to make it fit with this grammar pattern. But de aru also actually qualifies as being a verb. So in this way, you can kind of construe this example sentence as us using kagiri with a verb de aru, or as a noun plus the phrasing de aru, which is what it kind of demands. So that's kind of a little insider look to see how actually when we're using de aru with nouns and not adjectives to qualify grammar patterns guidelines, we're actually kind of turning them into nouns, because genki de aru, ichibu de aru just basically means to be healthy or to be a part. And so yeah, that's actually a verb phrasing basically. And so yeah, back to the topic. このチームの一部である is going to mean you as long as, or we didn't add kagiri, but if we added kagiri, that would mean as long as you are a part of this team. So if that's going to be the X, and that's going to be true, which probably is, so if you're a part of this team, then Y also needs to be true, and that's going to be renshu ni ikanakute wa ikemasen, and that's going to translate to you have to come to practice. So the first word there is going to be renshu, which means practice. We have the particle ni to mark practice as basically the destination, to the verb, which is the one we're going to use, the going verb iku, which means to go. It's going to be conjugated into its negative form, ikenai. Then we're going to kind of conjugate that in turn into the kind of te form of it to connect it with the next part of the phrasing. So ikunakute, then we have the particle wa, then we have ikemasen. And so that's a grammar pattern that we've actually covered before. The te form of verb plus the phrasing wa ikemasen means it is not okay to do that verb, but since we're using iku here in its negative form before we conjugate into its te form, it means it's not okay to not go. So if it's not okay to not go to practice, that just naturally turns into you must go to practice. And so yeah, let's just bring everything in the sentence together once again. We have このチームの一部である限り練習に行かなくてはいけません。You have to go to practice as long as you're a part of this team, basically. And so yeah, that's gonna wrap up our coverage of this definition, this grammar pattern using the word kagiri to mean as long as, x kagiri y to mean y as long as x. I can definitely assure you that we will be seeing kagiri in a lot more grammar patterns that have different nuances and meanings. That's part of the reason why it's so requested a topic, I believe, because people are so confused because it's used in so many grammar patterns they don't know what the heck is going on. So that's why they asked for coverage. But this will be our first coverage of the word in this function of it, as long as. So yeah, hopefully you learned a thing. Look forward to learning more things and more things and more things and more and more and more.